is that he was a cause in separating me from my family, and that's all he'll tell her. But at this point with him, it's like whatever little piece of info you could get from him, you'll take it. So then, Eva told him, that was a really bad time in her life when she used to deal with Brent. She used sex to feel love. And so she had a little, pretty much a whole phase, but with some layers. So he wanted to know if she had feelings for him, for Brent still. And she, of course, said no. And he got upset when she had asked him, was Brent hurt? And because, of course, he felt like she shouldn't care. Like she should only care about him. So they, of course, have some nice romps while they're there. Because they're in North Carolina. They're on the beach. Nice home. And he tells her that, your lips belong to me. No one else. And he told her, I did not understand that jealousy of Corinne until I saw you with him. And he tells her about a little bit about his mom. And she also says that, he made the comment his mom didn't love him enough to believe him, but he doesn't go into detail. So we clearly know there's some childhood trauma stuff that happened. So they get back to Manhattan. They go to sleep separately, of course. Gideon comes in and wakes up Eva and tells her Carrie's been attacked. He's in the hospital. So they rush to the hospital, found out that he apparently was attacked on Friday because they had been gone the whole weekend. And he had left there's no phones at that house they were located at. He wanted no communication with the outside world. So their cell phones were back in New York already. And so, of course, they had been getting calls, but they didn't have their phones. So she, of course, felt horribly guilty about that because she wasn't there. So apparently right after he went out with Trey at the party, Trey went home and he was about to get in a cab, and then somebody came behind him with a bat and they just beat the shit out of him. He never even saw the person. So Gideon, of course, completely took over the situation. He arranged for him, to get home care eventually. He let Eva's boss know, she's not going to be to work the next day. And her mother comes, and her mother was mad because she's like, I've been trying to call you all weekend. And so she's all pissed because, she's already an overprotector anyway. So Trey came after Eva had called him, and they had a whole conversation about Carrie and, that, he's not okay with his partner cheating on him, which I get. But he was still going to stay and help Carrie through this. So Carrie has the thought that he done fucked somebody's woman and the dude beat his ass. So either somebody's wife or somebody's girlfriend. So that's what Carrie's thinking has happened. So a couple days later, Carrie, he's still in the hospital because he got fucked up. Like, I mean, she made the comment in the book that she could almost barely recognize him. So he was fucked up pretty bad. So Carrie's still in the hospital. She goes back to work, but of course at night she comes back and she stays with Carrie. So she gets a Google alert about Gideon, and it's a picture of him and Corinne at a restaurant, and it wasn't an old picture. So then she gets a message that Brent Klein is waiting for her at the front desk. So of course she was gonna go, of course, after seeing that pic. So she shoots the pic to Gideon so that he knows that she knows, and then she goes to lunch with Brent, and she makes sure she goes to the same place that her and Carrie went to when all the paparazzi caught them. So they're having a conversation, and Brent basically tells her, he was crazy about her and he wants another chance. And she tells him, I love Gideon. And he's like, I don't believe you. And basically he lets her know, like, I'm going to keep coming for you. Like, I want to be with you. So then she leaves, and of course Angus is right there outside, and he takes her back to Crossfire. She gets in the elevator. The elevator shoots straight up to the top floor where Gideon is, and he pulls her out of the elevator. And he was just like, I need you to keep a low profile and not be out with Brent Klein. So she was pissed that he wasn't as pissed as she thought he was going to be. So she goes back to the hospital, talks to Carrie. She calls Gideon, and he was like clearly with someone. And she demanded to know who, and the phone got muffled and he hung up. So that morning while getting coffee, she runs into Dr. Lucas, and he tells her, you know, you need to let go of Gideon. He destroys people. He uses his money as a weapon and all this type of stuff. So she tells him, you know, she knows about his wife. She already knows about that. And he tells her there's more to the story than just that. She's like, but I can't. He's like, but I can't say anything due to the confidentiality. So she goes to work. She has her lunch with her boss. And then they, of course, and Steven, he's there too, his partner. And they, of course, they know everything that's going on because everything's kind of playing out in the tabloids. And so, you know, she lets them know she's gonna get Gideon back. And so she felt, you know, she had been feeling so awful with everything that had been going on, and, you know, clearly feeling, you know, Gideon's pulling away. He's spending time with Corinne. And so she sent him like this gut-wrenching email about how it made her feel. And he writes her back and he's like, don't be afraid. So then he sneaks over that night, fucks her beyond beautifully. And then he's gone again when she wakes up. So on her way to work the next day, Angus was there. And Angus, she told Angus, tell your boss this. I'm not going to need your services anymore. And that was it. She left, and later that day, she went, picked up her dad from the airport. They had a really cute scene, you know, such love. It was beautiful. The following day, she calls Gideon to see, you know, if he's still going to go to therapy. He said he was, but he wasn't going to ride with her, like he'd meet her there. Of course, he doesn't show up at all. And apparently his individual therapy, he didn't come for that either. So through her convo with the therapist, she kind of feels like she might need to let this go. Even though she wants to try and fight for Gideon, she just kind of feels like maybe this isn't the right thing for her to do anymore. So she hadn't expected him to show up for the dinner to meet her dad. You know, even though they had made plans for it and he was going to bring Ireland, his baby sister, she didn't think he was going to show up, but he did. And they were eating when the detectives come to the door. And she's thinking it's in regards to Carrie. But then eventually, after a bunch of freaking small talk, the detective Graves tells her, when was the last time you saw Nathan Barker? Remember, Nathan's the former stepbrother that used to traumatize her. And she told them, you know, about 8 years ago. But she didn't say in court because you got to remember, her dad doesn't know anything about what happened. So the detectives tell her, well, Nathan was found dead this morning. So the detectives asked Gideon, of course, where he'd been the night before. And he told them, you know, he's like, you know, I'll tell you, but he kind of need to walk away. So clearly it was something that he didn't want her to hear. So her dad wanted to know why she looked like she was about to pass out at the mention of Nathan's name. And all she said was, you know, he was just a real bad bully and this and that. So the next morning, which to me, if he's a good detective or a good cop, he should have known this bitch lying. Like, no, something else is up. So the next morning, her mother comes over and was frantic because the detectives had just left her place that morning. So Eva told her, yeah, I knew last night they came by. And her mom's like, why didn't you tell me? And so her mother then tells her that they knew Nathan was in town and that he had gone to Richard and demanded $2 million because he had filthy photos of Eva. So her mother planned for her and Carrie to eventually do a little mini spa day. And she was like, great, we'll do that. So on her way out the door, Victor, her dad, comes out. And the first thing her mother says is like, what are you doing here? And he's like, I'm visiting our daughter. So there was like a lot of love that you could see that was still there between the two of them. And she like put her hand on his chest, like right on his heart. And she just, and like, I guess Eva never realized that there was all this emotion involved. So when they leave out, her and her mom, she just kind of, she was walking her mom out. She was like, why did you never tell me there was so that you were in love with dad? And her mom said because it wasn't enough. Her mother wants to live a certain type of a lifestyle. She knows that. And she's like, can you really see me being a cop's wife? And she's like, yeah, no, I couldn't. So then Eva and her dad, they have a convo about Gideon. Her dad had been Googling him and saw pics of him and Corinne at the event. The previous night, it was that whole Kingsman launch, which was the whole start of how everything started. It's like, oh my gosh. And it's at that fuck pad building. So she's crushed and thinks that this was why he doesn't want to see her anymore, because he saw the pics of her from from Nathan. So that's what she thinks it is. Like, he's disgusted by her. And it's like, she was a kid, you know? So, I mean, I can kind of understand if he saw the pictures and he, you know, that's hard to not see those type of pics. But at the same time, she was a freaking kid. And she didn't have control over that, you know? But that's where her mind is. That's what she thinks is happening. So she calls him and says all this stuff to him about, you know, I know that's probably why you don't want me. You saw those pictures and you can't be with anymore. And she's like, we're done, you know. So the first few days are absolutely awful for her. Poor girl, especially after her dad leaves. She could kind of hold it together when he's there, but after he left, she was just shit. Poor girl. Her mother had set up that spa day. And she was like, I want everything new. Cut my hair, new nails. You know, she wanted a whole new look. So she went to an event. She saw Christopher and his mother. She pulled the mother aside, and she shamed her for not believing her child. And the lady was like, you know, fuck you. You don't know what you're talking about. And Eve was like, I know that your son is fucked up, and I know that he went through things that he shouldn't have had to have gone through. And she's like, you know, maybe you aren't to blame for what, you know, you didn't know when it was happening, but once he told you, you are responsible for that. And she leaves or whatever, and so she goes to work that Monday, and she sees him in the elevator, and she was about to get out, and when he told her, he's like, don't. So she stayed, and all he said was that he was, you know, that she was so beautiful it hurt. She could see that he was still wearing the ring that he bought her, that she bought him, and he had bought her a ring. I thought it was a choker. I don't know how I read that wrong, but I did. But he had bought her a ring as well. And she wasn't wearing that. And she had actually given it back to him. So he was like, all he could say to her was wait. And then she got out of the elevator. It was crazy. So now Eva was like, I'm in investigative mode, because she wants to figure out, okay, what's really going on? Because this doesn't make sense. For him to tell me to wait, for him to say, like, this doesn't make sense. So after turning down the rides for weeks, she finally goes to Angus, and she's like, do you know where Corinne lives? Take me to her. Angus takes her. So she goes up. Corinne tried to play that role like someone was there, and she couldn't let her in. And Eva's like, bitch, stop. No one's there. So she told her, I know that he's not fucking you, and I know that you know that you'll never have him again. And the look on Corinne's face, she was like, yep, I was right. So something's going on. This is clearly a front. Him being photoed and pictured with Corinne. And so then she leaves from there, and then she goes to Dr. Lucas's office. And she had set up an appointment because she had Carrie, you know, in on the whole investigative mode too. So Carrie had set up an appointment. So she goes to the meeting for Dr. Lucas. So while she's there, she, you know, scolds him, you know. And before she got there, Angus told her, he's like, Mr. Cross isn't going to be happy. She's like, I'll deal with that later. You know, hell, he going to be mad at me anyway. So I'll deal with it when I deal with it. So we find out that Dr. Lucas is a pediatrician. So the mother had made a comment that they had, when her and Eva were talking, that she had taken him to pediatricians to see if anything had happened, if he'd been violated, and there was nothing. So I said, oh, so this makes sense. So this is the pediatrician that lied and said that there was nothing going on, because clearly something happened to this guy when he's having these damn nightmares and freaking out. Like